Aning nyungun deles.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so the Dharma that we come here to listen is Mahayana Dharma, and therefore it is extremely important at the beginning to set our motivation. Actually, setting up the motivation properly is something which is crucial for even ordinary worldly activities. So let's say you want to engage in some ordinary activity, I don't know, something like cooking or business or whatever. If you set a strong and powerful motivation at the beginning of the activity, then this actually guarantees that you will be able to carry through without disappointments, without being dispirited, without without anything actually becoming a major problem for you. So if this is true for worldly activities, how much more important it is for Dharma. So the important here, as it says in Lam Rim, we are looking for purity. We have to have the purity of the speech, the purity of the instruction, you could say, the purity of the Lama, the purity of the student, and the purity of the Dharma. So first of all, we talk about the purity of the instruction, of the speech, and this refers to obviously the origin of where the speech is coming from. So we know that all of these teachings have come from Buddha Shakyamuni, and that is very important. The next one is the purity of the Lama. The purity of the Lama here is very important because we are looking for a teacher who has to be an authentic teacher, and they are teaching for the right purpose. The teacher should not be teaching with the intention of becoming someone who is very famous, or out of the intention to antagonize other teachers, and so forth. Then we have the purity of the student. So the students, when they attend the teachings, again, they should come with the right motivation, right? They should set out thinking, I am going out to attend this teaching, because if you do like this, if you think like this, then this sets you out to go and attend teachings. And also, you should not be thinking that I'm going to listen to the teachings so that I will develop a reputation, that I'm a good student, that I have received this rare teaching, or that in the future I can pass it on and make some money as a side hustle, and so forth. So there has to be purity from the side of the student. And as we say, the student should always check and investigate the teacher and the Dharma. Now, we talk about the purity of the Dharma, and we know that these teachings, the 84,000 bundles of teachings, were given by Buddha Shakyamuni exclusively out of his great affection and compassion for all sentient beings. So it is very important to understand where those teachings are coming from. In order to be able to teach, Buddha Shakyamuni spent 3 countless great eons amassing the 2 types of accumulation, and from there, through this accumulation, he gained the potency and the capacity to teach pure Dharma that is exactly according to the needs and predisposition of each individual student. And that actually means that there will be interpretative teachings and definitive teachings. On some occasions, the Buddha taught there is a self. In other occasions, he taught there is no self, and so forth. So according to the needs of the audience and their predispositions, different teachings were given. So it is very important for the students now, when they encounter the teachings, to have a critical mind. We need to analyze, make sure we can understand the distinction between definitive and interpretative teaching, and then contemplate, listen, contemplate, then meditate on this in order to generate the realizations. But first of all, we must be clear about the intention of the Buddha when he gave those teachings. So we should have that sense of curiosity, thinking, oh, in this occasion, the Buddha taught this and this. I wonder why. Why did he teach this in this occasion and something different in another occasion, right? So all of this is important for us. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that the teaching that is given might be one and the same, but the way that it is perceived or understood by different disciples is different. So, for example, Geshe was saying, imagine we have one teaching or one class that is given in the monastery. It is the same teacher who is teaching the same text, right? But in the class, you might have individuals who, some of them are sharper, some have, like, let's say they are the average students, and there are some who are not so sharp. And therefore, some people will immediately and easily understand what the teacher is conveying. Other people will grasp some of the meaning. Other people might get confused, mix up the order, lose their place in the, let's say, in the text and so forth. So you can see one teaching can be received or understood or misunderstood in many different levels. And Geshe was saying that was also my experience. So in the past, in the monastery, Rinpoche was teaching, and I thought, I wonder how this teaching will be, at which level. And initially I thought, this was going to be too easy and so forth. However, Rinpoche aimed the teaching or tailored the teaching in a way that it was neither too difficult nor it was too easy. It was not diluted. It was just like just the right amount, the right level. So you have to understand that the karma and the merit of the students also plays a big role in terms of how they receive those teachings. So, for example, even if and that was true back in India, as it is these days in monasteries, as it is in our class and everywhere. So even if, let's say, Master Nagarjuna were to come and act to you as your teacher, depending on your merit and your karma, perhaps you could understand some of what he said, but it would be difficult to completely understand every word that he said, isn't it? Okay, so very important here that we set our motivation. And when we set our motivation, we say that whatever I'm doing here, which obviously it is to come here and attend this Lam Rim class, that is a complete teaching, including all the stages of training of the three individuals. But when you say I'm coming here to attend this class of the Lam Rim, always think I am doing it for the sake of all sentient beings who are as vast as the vastness of space. We might be just a few people in the class, but always train yourself to include everyone, every sentient being. And just think, I am just like themselves, just as we all experience suffering. We don't want to experience suffering. All of us want to experience happiness, only happiness. And therefore, for this reason, I'm here in this class to learn, to understand and practice this Lam Rim in order to reach the state of enlightenment and benefit all other sentient beings who are as vast as the vastness of space. So with bodhicitta motivation, make sure you set your mind to attend the class properly. So just to remind you again, the root text that we were doing is the Song of Spiritual Experience composed by Je Rinpoche. And together with that, we will read from the commentary of the third Dalai Lama Sonam Gyatso, The Essence of Refined Gold. Okay, so the other thing is, as we said, the subject matter is the Lam Rim, but it is the realizations of the Lam Rim, or even the understanding of the topics of the Lam Rim, is not something that we generate in our minds straight away, easily, immediately. So you might be thinking, this is difficult, or I am forgetting some points, or it's not progressing as I would like, and become disheartened and dispirited. However, this is not the right attitude. The opposite should be the truth. Right? Now, in Tibetan, there is even this saying about the Dharma that says at least 100 times, meaning, the more I hear it, and if I can hear it 100 times and more, the more I hear it, the more I become familiar with it, the more I can derive some meaning and some essence. And therefore, we should apply a lot of effort, not be discouraged and, abandon it. But if it is difficult, we need to excite ourselves with enthusiastic effort. So remember, we often look at the biographies of great beings in the past. Now, the word for biography in Tibetan for holy beings is called nam tar. So the second syllable tar means liberation. And the Nam is the many aspects or the many efforts they did or the different methods they engaged in order to generate all the necessary realizations to reach that state of liberation. So this is what biography teaches you. It teaches you how hard they tried in order to reach that result. And if we look at the very obvious example, Buddha Shakyamuni strived for 3 countless great eons. Asanga was in retreat for 12 years. Milarepa had to endure incredible difficulties, right? So these are the examples that we should bring into mind. It's not easy, and for that reason, we should put a lot of effort. So the Buddha actually has said, the Buddha himself has said, I am my own protector, I am my own enemy. So for the first one, when he says, I am my own protector. So the thing is, we have to see where the suffering comes from. Suffering and problems come from not having disciplined the mind. When the mind is not disciplined, we can see that in the course of one day, just within 24 hours, we can engage in so many inappropriate activities, and we create so many causes that will result in rebirth in samsara and bad rebirth again and again and again. Right? So therefore, we understand that if we set our course to say that I will only try to engage, to establish virtuous activities, right? So I will try to accumulate as much virtuous karma as I can. I will not harm anybody. And then as a result of this, I will obtain the precious human rebirth. And from life after life, I will avoid having rebirths in the lower migrations, and I will have a good rebirth. So eventually, I will progress towards liberation and omniscience. So you can see, I can be my own protector. So as you can see here, it says, I am my own protector, meaning I am my own policeman. I police myself. I am my own teacher, right? In a sense, it is just me. All I have to do is to check my behavior. Every time there is an option, it is me who will advise myself. I don't need an external policeman. I don't need an external teacher. I should be able to make the decision and say, oh no, I will not do this because this is inappropriate, right? So in a sense, if you do your own checking, as we say, you don't need an external police. You don't need an external law. What you have is ethics. Ethics is what guides you. So, this exactly is what the Lam Rim practice and the Lojong practice is. And this is what we try to do every day. So the Lam Rim and the Lojong practice is not something separate, something solid that someone is going to hand over to you. The Lam Rim practice, the Lojong practice, is every day trying to engage yourself in established virtue and say, whoever I will act in a way so that whoever I meet, I will make that person happy. I will make that person have a pleasant experience, isn't it? And when I make others happy, then this will make myself, my own mind, will make me happy. And if something unfortunate happens, unpleasant happens, the way to think about it is to contemplate, well, this is the nature of things in samsara. Things go wrong sometimes. And actually what is happening to me today, it's a small thing. If I consider all the bigger troubles, the bigger suffering that is happening to so many other people around me today. So if you think like this, and if you act like this, there is no reason to have any fear, any doubt, any superstition in your mind. So as it says, I am my own protector, because it really depends upon me, upon my behavior. And if I act in the right way, this has the power to protect me now and in all my future lives. I will have nothing to fear. Actually, if I treat other people in such a nice way, everywhere I go, I will be welcomed. So for example, there are a few people sitting in a coffee shop, in a restaurant, and immediately they will say, oh, come and sit with us, come and join us. We have a drink together. We have a coffee together. We have a meal together. I will be invited. I have nothing to be afraid of. Then the next phrase that the Buddha said is, I am my own enemy. So if instead of treating other people nicely, if you always shout at them and criticize them and treat them badly, well, if people see you approaching, they will say to each other, oh, make sure there's no empty seat here so this person doesn't come and sit with us. Don't associate, don't look at this person, don't invite them, right? People will avoid you. Okay, so we know that these things happen in society. These are everyday, ordinary experiences. It's not even dharma. It's just ordinary reaction in society. Now, as it says, I am my own enemy. So what that says is there is no external enemy. And if there is an enemy, I have to fabricate my own enemy. I create my own enemy out of my own afflictions, my hatred, my ignorance, my attachment. These are the things that motivate me to go and create trouble, to disturb, to get into fights and so forth. I am causing those things. I am initiating those things. So that is something very important to contemplate, right? There's no external enemy. I must create my enemy. If I am to have an enemy, I must do it myself. So it is very important to understand this, right? Because what happens is if there is a situation of conflict, right, or the situation, the conditions are such, when we talk about an enemy, always we look for the enemy externally. We always think that this other person is so wrong, is so bad, so, so negative and so forth. When we look at ourselves, we think that we are faultless, we are so good. And this actually is the result of very strong self-cherishing. It is very strong self-cherishing that makes you think that I am perfect. I've done nothing wrong. So if there's anything wrong, it comes from these other people. They are faults, but they are out there. If you actually seek for your own faults, if you turn inwardly and seek, you will find those faults. You will identify them. So to give you an example, right, there is an object that everybody wants to have, and you decide for your own self-cherishing, you think I should have it. But then if you stop and think, you will see that this is my self-cherishing talking here, claiming this object. But actually, if I take this object will make this other person angry. It will upset this other person. So now it's a case of weighing what is more important. My own self-cherishing is more important, or upsetting the other person. What is the most important here? And then the last two lines of this verse is, whatever good or bad actions I do, I am my own witness, right? So whatever activities, did I disturb, did I cause havoc during the 24 hours a day? How many bad things I've done, or how many good things I've done? I don't need external witnesses. I am the witness. I should recognize all those things. So then the verse continues by saying, if I subdue my mind properly, I will be reaching the state of liberation. So this is incredibly pithy advice of the Buddha. So this whole issue of subduing the mind, this is the thing that we have to do. So again and again, the Buddha has taught many different things, but all of them, they are methods for subduing the mind so that we can either reach the state of liberation and omniscience through the sutric path, or the state of Vajradhara, the union of Vajradhara, through the tantric path. But this, whatever of those results we attain, it comes through relying on these different methods that are stages of the path, and they're all methods for properly subduing our mind. So this is what it is, the stages of the path, beginning with what is the proper way to rely on the teacher, understanding precious human rebirth, thinking about death and impermanence, moving into refuge, thinking about the presentation of the law of cause and effect, and so on and so forth. All the practices that are included within the presentation of the individuals of the three scopes. So these are things that we should always remember and revise and always have running through our mind. You know how it is, you have someone who has a little shop, and at the end of the day, they always run through their mind, like, how many people came into my shop? And this person came and they bought this and this, and then the other person came and they spent that much in my shop, right? So this is kind of like a revision meditation of who came into the shop. So we should have this constant revision meditation of all the important points. here of the stages of the path. Actually, great practitioners are so familiar with the Lam Rim that they are capable of revising the entire Lam Rim within a few minutes. We're not capable of doing that because we don't have that familiarity, right? But this is what we are advised to do. Yeah. So, there is quite a lot of debate. You find people who believe in Dharma, who are religious, and you have people who do not accept religion at all. They don't accept Dharma at all. There is actually quite a big difference in the way that these two types of individuals think. Because, of course, both individuals will experience some happiness and some suffering in their lives. But the way that they interpret this or they react to this is different, because the person who accepts Dharma will say, because of past lives, it is quite possible I have created this and this cause, and now I'm experiencing this result. And I know there will be future lives, so I better be careful. So it's a completely different approach. Whilst the person who does not accept the existence of Dharma is not a person who accepts the existence of past and future lives. And therefore, this will never come into their mind. Okay, so when they experience right now some happiness or some suffering, they will never think to link this with previous actions they have done in their past lives. So that's a completely different attitude. Let's look again at verse number 5 of the Song of Spiritual Experience, where it says, "You are the eyes for seeing the myriad collections of scripture. You are the supreme gateway for fortunate ones voyaging to liberation. Stirred by compassion, you illuminate the most skillful approaches. All spiritual teachers, I respectfully pay homage to you." So in the first line, we have the analogy, or it talks about the eyes. So it says, "You are the eyes for seeing the myriad collection of scriptures." And we said last week that here the eyes can be taken to refer to all those Lam Rim texts. So the analogy of the eyes is that if you have eyes, you can see clearly, whilst if you're lacking the eyes, you will be in constant darkness. You won't be able to see. So we say that all these Lam Rim texts, such as Lam Rim Chenmo, or the intermediate Lam Rim, or the essence of refined gold, or and so forth, are like the eyes that allows us to gain insight into the myriad scriptures of the Buddha, such as the 84,000 bundles of teachings and so forth. So to explain this, if, for example, you were to study Lamrim Chenmo, the great exposition of the stages of the path, this will eventually allow you to gain understanding of the perfection of wisdom sutras. Right now, if we try to engage any of the Prajnaparamita texts, the extensive, middle, short, whatever it is, we find that we have great difficulty, right? But if you study Lamrim Chenmo, it is as if your eyes open up. Lamrim Chenmo becomes the eyes that allows you to comprehend the Prajnaparamita texts and so forth. The second line, it says, "You are the supreme gateway for fortunate ones voyaging to liberation." There are some beings with great fortune that seek liberation, but the gateway through they have to pass is, again, those teachings. And then at the end it says, "Stirred by compassion, you illuminate the most skillful approaches." Those teachings were given motivated through compassion. They were not given because the Buddha wanted to, or whatever is the author here of those texts, was seeking faith or fame and money and reputation and so forth. Okay, so it says at the end, the last line, "All spiritual teachers respectfully pay homage to you." So this is how Je Rinpoche pays homage. We explain also that there is another interpretation, another way to explain. And we say the eyes are not the Lam Rim text, but the eyes can refer to one's own spiritual teacher. The very teacher who teaches you the Lam Rim, will explain the meaning of the text, will guide you through the text. We know that the Lam Rim texts have originated or have come out of the Prajnaparamita text. So the teacher who is teaching you the Lam Rim becomes the eyes that through which you can understand easily the Prajnaparamita text. And then again, the second line, "The supreme gateway for fortunate ones voyaging to liberation," again can be attributed to your spiritual teacher. You have to go through the explanation of the teacher, through relying on the teacher, through this relationship on the teacher. That is the gateway if you want to move along the path to liberation. And the last line also, stirred by compassion, you eliminate the most skillful approaches, again attributed to the teacher. This is why the teacher, or how the teacher is giving you these teachings, right? So Geshe was saying, as you can see, there are two interpretations. You can take these lines to refer to the Lam Rim texts themselves, or you can take it to refer to the teacher who teaches you and explains the Lam Rim to you. Whichever of the two you find most suitable to your mind, please follow that. So there's one thing here in terms of commentaries. Everyone is allowed to make a comment, to give, because you can see, as I say, there are different ways of interpreting those words. And so you can comment on it in different ways. And everyone is allowed to attribute a new commentary or to give a new interpretation. Yes, I was saying, I remember it has happened to me. I've heard this, or someone was saying, oh, why do you interpret this point in this way? My teacher does not interpret it in this way. But actually, interpretation, a new interpretation, new insight is totally permissible. It is allowed. Now, we see that, we have that thing that we have mentioned, that the original Lam Rim text, which was the lamp of the path to enlightenment, composed by Master Atisha, is only just a few pages long, 5 pages long. And yet we say that this text is a text that includes and incorporates all the points of the teachings of the Buddha, all the crucial points. And, the teachings of the Buddha are 84,000 bundles of teachings, so very extensive. And then people say, people might wonder why the Lamp to the Path is such a short text. And then you come into its commentaries, or you come into Lamrim Chenmo, for example, where you might be running into 500 pages and so forth. Yes, this happens because when you want to give a commentary, you might want to be quite detailed. Right, so you want to use analogies, examples, you might want to quote from other texts, you might want to give stories, anecdotes, and so forth. And once you start adding all this, obviously the length increases more and more. The initial text, the Lamp of the Path, is very short. It might not be very easy to understand, and that's why we need to rely on much more extensive commentaries. So anyway, that is a comment about commentaries. New commentaries and interpretations are permissible, are welcomed. So you can see you can have great scholars, and they each one might give their own teachings and expand on a particular way, or have their own special presentation, isn't it? However, all these different explanations are on the same meaning, on the same basic thing of the Lam Rim. So you know how many Lam Rim teachings we have happening in the world right now, or how many Lam Rim books and commentaries. You might have one scholar that actually explains very well death and impermanence. You have someone else who talks very well about the law of karma and causes and results, right? And we end up with many publications, so then all of this has to be translated, and so on and so forth. So there seems to be this flourishing and proliferation. Okay, so there are many different commentaries from many different scholars, but they are all commenting on the same thing, the basic thing of the Lam Rim. What is it? We know Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa has identified this, who says the life force of the Lam Rim is the three principal aspects of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. So everybody is commenting on those three, but in a different way, in different styles. Some will be more extensive, more eloquent, some will be shorter, and so forth. So, for example, one person goes from A to B, the destination is the same, but they might choose to travel in a different way. Somebody wants to go in the car, somebody wants to cycle there with a push bike. Okay, so we'll continue with the next verse, verse number 6, which begins talking about the greatness of the teachings of this instruction. So it says, this instruction on the stages of the path to enlightenment flowed excellently in succession from Nagarjuna and Asanga, crown jewels of all the learned ones of this world. Your banners of flame flatter vibrantly among sentient beings. So Nagarjuna and Asanga here are described as the crown jewels. Okay, so basically what it says here, there have been many scholars, many learned beings in this world, but amongst all these great scholars, Nagarjuna and Sangha are the supreme. So this expression here, the crown jewels, as we say, does not refer to lineage or, being born, let's say, as princes in the royal family or having wealth or anything like this. It's actually talking about the qualities of realizations. For example, we know that Master Asanga strived for many years, did these very long retreats to develop these qualities to benefit all mother sentient beings. And at the end, he wrote down the 5 texts that brought extreme benefit to sentient beings. And similarly, Master Nagarjuna composed the 6 treatises on logic that are extremely useful in terms of understanding the profound view. So compared to other scholars, as I say, they are achievement. And achievement here are the realizations in their mind, the qualities of their minds, the fact that they traversed the 5 paths and went along, developed the 10 stages, and had incredible realizations. This is what qualifies them to be considered crown jewels. Now, both Nagarjuna and Sangha were Indians and probably from South India, so their complexion must have been quite dark. And they lived for a very long, to an old age. So imagine someone who has dark complexion and is all wrinkled. Geshe says, I'm sure that if you look at them, it will be like an old person, wrinkled, not very appealing at all. And many people judging from the outside, we say, who is this beggar? Or, who's this old man? Not necessarily generating faith. Unfortunately, we have this tendency to judge people by their appearance. And if we see someone who is good looking, youthful, good looking, or if we hear that the person has a lot of money or is of a high family and so forth, there tends to be that fascination with this person. So immediately, somehow, we think that this person is important. Why? Because they look good, right? And then we see someone who looks old or doesn't look appealing and so forth, and we dismiss that person, like, who is this person? And especially when it comes to judging a teacher, a Dharma teacher, we have to be very careful here, because very often we would accept someone as being a good teacher because they have a reputation, or they have money, or they have a big name, or they are good looking. But the way to truly judge a teacher is through their speech. You have to examine their speech. What are they teaching? And always examine their conduct and behavior. So these are the defining factors to decide if someone is indeed a good teacher, not the way they look, right? There was this Lama, which is the four from the various lineages that we have. We have like the heart essence lineage is the one that has come these days down to the monasteries, and the Geshe, the original Lama in Tibet, who was like the lineage holder of that lineage. He was disfigured. He looked very humble. He had like a hunchback at his back. And he always walked kind of hunched down. And when he would come, he went to come, actually. So when he went to come to give some teachings, people dismissed him, thinking he could not be an important teacher or a practitioner because of the way that he looked. Okay, so as it says here, as we can see here, J. Rinpoche is spending a bit of time to really praise Nagarjuna and Asanga, the two great masters. As it says, you are the best among the learned ones in this world. The Buddha himself had prophesied the coming and the role of masters Nagarjuna and Asanga. He said, in the future, when my teachings in this world have declined, these two beings will come and they will reinvigorate the teachings and explain them properly. So that is the most important thing that they did, that Masters Nagarjuna and Asanga, they were the only two who were capable of doing this. As we say, there were many scholars in India, but actually they could not clearly identify which of the teachings of the Buddha are considered to be definitive and which are interpretative. And that is a very important point. So a definitive teaching is a teaching that is given by the Buddha and should be taken literally. So, for example, when the Buddha teaches impermanence and says the vase is impermanent, this is to be accepted as it is said. It is not open to interpretation. When the Buddha teaches emptiness, since all phenomena are empty, this teaching on emptiness is a definitive teaching. So it is to be taken literally, exactly the words that the Buddha said, this is what we accept. But there are other types of teachings that need to be understood as given provisionally. So in some cases, the Buddha said the self exists. In some other cases, the Buddha said the self does not exist. So one might get confused, like, okay, which one do I accept here? He said it exists, then he said it does not exist. So Masters Nagarjuna and Asanga were the ones who were able to very clearly differentiate and say, this is the case of an interpretative teaching. It's provisional. It means, although he said that the self exists in this particular audience, in reality, there is no self. So you need to understand that it is said in this way under those particular circumstances for this audience. However, the real intention is that the self does not exist. So we have other examples of this. For example, in most cases, you will hear the Buddha saying that samsara is full of mistakes, and samsara is something to be abandoned. However, in the second chapter of the Ornament of Realization, there is a presentation of 8 causes or 8 reasons of why bodhisattvas would take rebirth into samsara, and all this is considered to be virtues. So for the bodhisattvas who take rebirth out of their compassion to take care of sentient beings, rebirth in samsara is not something to be abandoned. It's virtue. It's something to be practiced. They have to actually try to take. They have to insist on taking rebirth in samsara. Another example, we hear that killing humans is an extremely negative action. However, when the Buddha was giving teachings on bodhisattvas, he said that if you are aware of a situation where there is a person who is plotting to kill a large number of other people, 20 people, 30 people, like this, right? Carrying weapons and plotting to kill them. If you are aware of this, then the bodhisattva can kill that one person in order to protect the lives of the other 20 or 30. And in this case, there is no negativity in the act of taking the life of that person for the bodhisattva, because it is done out of compassion. And therefore, again, this becomes an interpretative teaching. Okay, so we're still on verse number 6. We talk about Nagarjuna and Asanga, who are the crown jewels of all the learned ones of this world. Then it says, your banner of fame flatter vibrantly among sentient beings. You know how we put the banners on the top of the building and then the wind will cause them to flatter? So we have the analogy here talking about their fame. The fame is spreading everywhere. And then it talks about this, to have the whole verse, it says, this instruction on the stages of the path to enlightenment flowed excellently in succession from Nagarjuna and Asanga. So it's a very important point here. We talk about instruction. In the past, I remember when I was training as a translator, it was like this particular term, we had to translate it as oral instruction. Okay, and the reason for that is because if it is an instruction, it's something that has to be passed orally from mouth to mouth. So we have the lineage, but the instruction is passed from the mouth of the teacher to the ear of the student. And this is why, some great lamas have commented recently that if you only read a book, right, or if you rely on the internet, that is actually you're losing the instruction because it's not oral instruction. You're not getting the oral instruction. Okay, so as it says here, this is the instruction that flowed excellently in succession. We know that from Buddha Shakyamuni, we have 3 lineages going down. One is the lineage of profound view that comes down through Manjushri. From Manjushri, it went to Master Nagarjuna. From Master Nagarjuna, eventually it came down to Master Chandrakirti. From Master Chandrakirti to Vidyakokila. From Vidyakokila to Master Salimba. and from there to Atisha. Then we have the lineage of extensive deeds from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya, from Maitreya to Asanga, from Asanga down to Sengye Sambo, from Sengye Sambo down to Master Serlimpa, from Serlimpa to Master Atisha, from Atisha to Dromtumpa, and so forth. And then we have the third lineage, the lineage of blessed practice, which is the lineage that goes from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, from Manjushri eventually to Master Shantideva, and so forth. Okay, so this is how we have the flowing of this uninterrupted excellent succession of all the lineages. So that was on verse 6. And then we'll go into the next verse, verse 7, where it says, amongst instruction, it is the most precious of all gems, fulfilling all the wishes of beings without exception. So that is a very important feature of the Lam Rim. We know that the Lam Rim is organized in the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope, practices shared with the individual of the middle scope, and practices of the great scope. And this term here, shared, for the first two cases, is very important, because what it indicates is that these are not practices that you can omit. In order to reach the state of omniscience, you have to do the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope, and you have to engage the practices that are shared with the individual of the middle scope. Okay, we also had this expression on verse number 6 that says the stages of the path to enlightenment. And we have explained here that this expression does not refer to fully qualified paths. Fully qualified paths, especially of the Mahayana, are the paths of the 5 paths, paths of accumulation, preparation, and so forth. So here we're not talking about these 5 paths, but what we are saying is that whatever is the level you are, and we take it we are all beginners, whatever amount of virtue and merit you have to start engaging the practice somehow, right? So what will be your progress? So in that sense, we talk about stages of the path. Okay, so as we said, okay, that was in verse number 6, and then in verse number 7, we are discussing the second line that says, fulfilling all the wishes of beings without exception. And we talk about this presentation of the 3 scopes. So it is interesting to see how it all works together. Now, when we are at the level of the presentation of the practices of the individual of the small scope, we see that here the individual considers what it would be to be reborn in the hell realms or a hungry ghost or an animal, and they are terrified with this idea, and they say, no, I need to be reborn as a god or a human. I must make sure I avoid the 3 lower migrations. And with that in mind, what is taught to them is the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. So they think, okay, I can practice morality, I can recite some mantras. If I can do this level of practice, I will avoid being reborn in the 3 lower migrations. Then when we come to the middle scope, we see that the way of thinking has changed a bit, because the person thinks, okay, I might have avoided the 3 lower migrations, but even if I'm reborn as a god or a human, again, I have not escaped samsara. So let's say, take as an example, rebirth as a human. How long am I going to stay in this life? 80 years, 90 years, if I stay that long. But the thing is that due to previous karma from my previous lives, then when this life finishes, I will have to take another rebirth, and any rebirth within samsara, again, will include suffering. Therefore, I need to abandon the entirety of samsara. Then we come to the presentation of the great scope, where the person thinks, okay, I might have abandoned samsara. All right, I have achieved this for myself, but actually I have not established my own purpose. My own purpose will be to reach a state of Buddhahood that comes with the form body, the Dharma body, the nature Dharma body. I have not achieved those things yet, right? So then you understand that you need to engage in the 2 previous steps are not enough. They are stages, they are branches, they are preliminaries, but then you need to engage the practice of the great vehicle. So how fortunate we are, all of us, who say that we want to follow the path of the great vehicle. But first of all, the important thing is that we have to practice these other stages as preliminaries. So when we talk about an individual of the small scope, as you can see, it is someone who is very narrow-minded. They cannot think very broadly. And opposite to that, we have the individual of the great scope, who is someone who is thinking very broadly, very vastly. They're thinking about all sentient beings that are as vast as the vastness of space. So the important thing to understand in the Lam Rim is that we have the presentation of all the three scopes, of the practices shared with the individual of the small scope, shared with the individual of the middle scope, and then we have the practices of the Mahayana. Although all three are presented, it is important to understand that the Lamrim is not identifying the first two as being genuine paths. The first two, that are the ones shared with the small scope and the middle scope, are seen as branches, are seen as preliminaries. So we can say that the Lamrim is Mahayana, but in order to generate this great compassion, this bodhicitta for other sentient beings, which is the great scope, the Mahayana, it is necessary previously to train in those paths that are shared with the small scope and the middle scope. But we're not saying that the paths of the small scope and the middle scope are the genuine paths. Okay, so if there's any questions, please ask.
Hi, this is a question from a friend from YouTube. She says, Dear Geshe, thank you for covering the three principal aspects of the path last week. We are encouraged to generate the strong wish to get out of samsara by contemplating on the drawbacks of samsara. Since we will still be in samsara for some time, at least for this life, how should we balance the risk of falling into a depressive mental state, of being stuck in samsara this life, and the virtuous mind of renunciation? So in short, how can our mind be happy when renunciation is generated?
So Geshe says, yes, I understand what you're saying. And what we need to say here is that practicing Dharma is the most difficult thing. Practicing Dharma is not easy. It's very difficult. Because practicing Dharma means that you will have to train to discipline your mind. And disciplining the mind is something which is very difficult. We have examples of how hard it is. It took the Buddha 3 countless great eons to amass the necessary accumulations. And if you think, for example, arhats, even though they are not Buddhas, they have to work very difficult to reach the state of an arhat. We know from the biography of Milarepa how hard he had to work. Marpa, his teacher, he really ground him to the ground, isn't it? How, the story, he had him build the house, and then as soon as he built the house, which is very difficult to find the stones and all that, he built the house, he said, no, demolish it, start again from the beginning. And people were looking at that and they were aghast. It's like, what is this happening? However, what was Marpa teaching Milarepa, the message he was giving him is that, if you want to build yourself up to the point of enlightenment, you have to build up your accumulations. Obviously, there must have been some very special karmic connections from previous lives between Marpa and Milarepa. But we know it was like a relationship or a training with so much hardship. So in our case, right, the thing is that we often forget to think about our past karma, that what we experience right now is the result of past karma. So you get sick, and what is your immediate thought is like, oh, let me make an appointment to the hospital. I'm going straight to the hospital. So we're trying to address the external conditions, but we're not spending time thinking about the internal causes that come from previous life. And this is something that we have to consider and say, okay, in the past I did this and this and this due to my mind, but I can discipline the mind. I can make the mind better. I can improve the mind. So there's no disappointment when you know that you can improve it. So what we're giving this example, and we say as soon as we get sick, the first thing that we do is we go to the hospital because we are looking for some treatment. We're looking for some immediate relief, right? But the thing is, we're not addressing the inner cause. The inner cause is our attachment, our hatred, our pride, our ignorance, and so forth. And there is no doctor in no hospital that is going to give you a pill to overcome those things. You have to work very hard to identify your condition, how much attachment I have, how much anger I have, and so forth. And every day, make your best to minimize those things. We will see in the Lam Rim, it gives this explanation that says when you enter that training, you must have some recognition. So you see your teacher as a doctor, you see the Dharma as the medicine, and you see yourself as the patient. So I'm not sick right now, but I have to train myself to see myself as a patient, because I have to recognize what is it that is making me sick. Is my anger and hatred and all of my afflictions, isn't it? So making the effort to recognize this and minimize it, and then at the same time, generating joy, generating a mind that wishes to benefit others and so forth, improving the mind, increasing the positive in the mind. Those things help. So Geshe was saying, I have this example, there was this monk who came down to the monastery. He came from Tibet, and he was a very angry person. Okay, so that was his character. And he would come down in debate and he would be furious, because due to having previous great familiarity with anger, he was very angry. So it's very interesting that these days there is this great dialogue has been going for a while, between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Western scientists. And there is a lot of discussion. You see quite a lot of those scientists become fascinated or take great interest in Buddhism. But there is this fundamental difference that the approach from the Western scientists is that when we talk about anger or pride, they are looking for a particular location in the brain that becomes activated. Whilst in Buddhism, the presentation is that anger and pride and whatever is your affliction or the state of your mind is not something physical. It's not something that you can pinpoint and identify physically. It's a state of mind. It's mental, not physical. Sometimes His Holiness jokingly saying, if you can really map the brain, and you can say, okay, this is the anger area, this is, the attachment area, this is the pride area. If you can really map it so accurately, then he says, okay, if you open up and remove this, what will you find there? Okay, so we have to understand that, of course, there is connection between the state of the mind and, let's say, the body, and in particular here, the brain. But the thing is that Western science is not actually looking deep enough into the state of the mind, right? They just go as far as to, let's say, map the brain or, the physical aspect. They don't go into the presentation of the mind. So the thing is that science is definitely trying to improve the lives of people, but through material means, right? So they will do all the research, which is material research, right, in the lab, under the microscope, and so forth, to produce something or find something, create something that can be beneficial to others. But for example, what we have in Buddhism, which is the qualities of the mind, of, let's say, the Buddha, or Protector Maitreya, or Master Asanga, and so forth. This is not something that they could identify in this way. Okay, there seems to be one question in the class. Okay, yeah, just don't be shy. Ask your question. It's just us, just the group, just us amongst friends. You will clarify your doubt, perhaps. You clarify something.
Yeah, Geshe, thank you for your kind teaching. I just want to understand the idea of a definitive teaching. So I think this is very dumb of me, but I just kind of try to understand. So we have the three baskets, which is the Vinaya, the Sutra, and Abhidhamma. So are they, I think for Abhidhamma's interpretive or something? Am I right? And so for Sutra, okay, Vinaya, I have no idea because those are monks. I'm interested in the Sutric one. So does that mean that the Sutric teachings will be definitive? So does that mean that definitive, and we cannot debate, we cannot question these teachings? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so very good question. All right, so as we say, the Buddha, our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, has given a lot of teachings, 84,000 bundles of teachings, and we classify those broadly into the three Pitakas. We have the Abhidhamma Pitaka, we have the Vinaya Pitaka, we have the Sutra Pitaka. Now, when we look at the Vinaya, what is the Vinaya? So the Vinaya is mainly ethical training in ethics. So basically it is advice and instruction that the Buddha has given to the different levels of ordained and lay people. So you have fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns, then you have the first level of ordination for monks and nuns, then you have the preparatory nuns and so forth. So for example, for the fully ordained monks, they have 322 rules that they have to abide. The nuns have 334. And as we say, and so forth, this is just an example. So in the Vinaya, basically, the Buddha is saying, I want you to obey this rule, or I want you to follow this behavior, because the main purpose here is to restrain or to minimize negativity of your body, speech, and mind. Therefore, those things are not negotiable. There is nothing interpretative in the Vinaya. What I say goes 100%. So, for example, you will find rules there that say how you are to wear the shendap. The shendap has to be worn properly. You don't throw it on the ground. It shouldn't touch the ground, and so forth. When the ordained eat, they have to eat at this time in this particular way. There's nothing to be negotiated here, right? It's all very clear. It's training in ethics. When we come to the Sutra, the Sutra Pitaka, the Sutra is mainly training in concentration. Again, you don't want to start interpreting things here. Where we have interpretation is when we have training in wisdom. All right, the training in wisdom has definitive and interpretative aspects, because, for example, we have the different turnings, the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma, and we say that in those three turnings, we have different presentations of different degrees of subtlety of the self or selflessness. So the first turning that says that phenomena do not have characteristics is considered to be interpretative teaching, provisional. Okay. Okay, so maybe we have misquoted the vows of the Gelug and the Gelugma. Okay, probably for the Gelugma must be 364, and for the Gelug 324. So these are instructions that are given in the Vinaya. All right. Okay. So thank you very much. Very good.